Welcome back to the Sports Complex on a Monday afternoon. It was a big sports weekend. Conference championship games happening in the NFL. We now know what our Super Bowl will be. Lots of college basketball action. Not great for the Longhorns, but not great for a lot of teams. It is a intense season right now with a lot of upsets happening around the world of college basketball. NBA happening as well. Trade deadline looming next week. Lots to talk about today, and of course, we want to talk about it with you on the text line, 512-447-3776, 512-447-3776 is the text line number. You guys drive the show. I just try to keep it on the rails. That means we try to get to everybody's text messages during the show. Talk to you whether you have good news or bad news, hot takes. You gotta take on one of the games this weekend, or you got to take on the big Texas game tonight. Any of that you want to throw in there, a trade you want to see happen in the NBA, or a hiring you want to hear or you want to see for the Commanders or the Seahawks, all that stuff. Throw it on in the text line, 512-447-3776. It was a nice weekend to do some cleaning, get ready, and then Saturday, you didn't have to do as much. I watched the Royal Rumble. It was fun. Watch that on a Saturday night, and then Sunday, you get up, and then you enjoy yourself, and then go watch football all day, and then, the teams you thought were going to win kind of did okay, and then the underdog won, and it was, I don't know, it was the Super Bowl everybody wanted, but it's Super Bowl they wanted it in Kansas City, and the Super Bowl they wanted, in San Francisco, but I sometimes it's hard to break that barrier, and we'll get more into that in the 5 o'clock. How about that? How about in the 5 o'clock we get more into the NFL, and we'll break down those games and go into why the Lions bit themselves and why Baltimore couldn't get it done, and they both had real shots, and at least there were two games where there was real shots for both teams in them. You like to see that. Well, we did not see a team that played well at all on Saturday, and I shouldn't say it all. There was some points where they were fine and, didn't get outplayed, but overall, doing the things you cannot do, especially in a road game. For Texas loses to BYU, number 21 BYU. I believe they dropped to 22 in the poll after dropping two games before Texas. Texas goes in, lose to BYU, 72-84. BYU wins that game, and really, at the end of the day, there's two sides of this. One is the realistic side that winning road games in the Big 12, especially against teams that are in the upper tier of the Big 12, the ranked teams in the national polls and the AP poll, those are just going to be hard games all season. No one's going to be perfect in the Big 12. No one's going to be able to walk through and just beat everybody. We've seen it with the top teams like Kansas, who lost this weekend, and Houston, who's lost a few this weekend. Houston, who's playing Texas tonight, they have a huge road test tonight against Texas. That this is a conference that is just very hard to win a lot of road games in, a lot of really good basketball environments. This is the first time Texas had got in to BYU and seen what there was happening there, and the crowd was electric for it. They were ready to go for it, and BYU came out with the game plan that Texas didn't really have an answer for, and it just felt that Texas was not able to switch players the way they needed to, and the game plan was do not let them get hot from three. If they score layups, let them score layups, but don't let them get hot from three, because once they get hot from three, it's over. And that was the game plan. However, that game plan seemed like it wasn't going to work, as BYU just kept going to the paint. They ended up with 40 points in the paint. Basically half of their scores were in the paint. That's a huge number of points to allow in the paint. And, Texas, this is a problem for them all season long, that their rim protectors are more weak side and coming over, and their help defender rim protectors in Dylan Mitchell and Dylan Dessou can do it somewhat. Caden Shedrick hasn't had that pop since his injuries have kind of reignited this season. Brock Cunningham is not a guy who's going to get up and block a lot of shots. Zarek Onyema looked a little bit lost out there as well, just not able to handle coming off and helping. And they were able to go at Texas, and it was more of a reputation of three-point shooting. It definitely picked up in the second half. They shot 44% from the behind the arc in the second half, and that was more where you were worried you didn't want them to get started out there. It didn't matter, though, because they waited too long to start playing off that three-point line and start trying to come in a little bit. They made some adjustments at points, but at that point, their offense wasn't potent enough. And we talked about it on Friday. You can't let BYU get into the 80s because you're not going to get in the 80s. This offense for Texas, they're not a fast enough offense. They're not a team that's going to be putting up 80 every night unless you're playing a bad team where you're constantly getting rebounds and coming off them. They're hard. They don't in the half court. They go pretty slow. They don't score a ton of points. We saw Max Abmas not have a great game as they were kind of coming off on him and really trying to push him away. He goes 4 for 12. That's a problem that Texas is going to have to keep solving is, their shooters, Max Abmas and Tyrese Hunter, their accountability on the road to stay at a productive clip. Dylan Disu still did his job. He only plays 27 minutes because he gets in foul trouble, because he's trying to play help. By the way, I didn't think this was a well-officiated game. This was a game that it's very rough when bigs are allowed to hit bigs, but bigs are not allowed to touch guards. And when you just play it by position, and so the foul isn't the foul, it's the position is the foul, it's infuriating to watch. There was too many plays that BYU ran at the bucket, didn't get touched, and got fouled, and they called a foul. With barely and it just those kind of calls were bad early on to just compile on Texas' own mistakes. And this isn't the right fault that Texas lost. It was just infuriating to watch as well. Dylan Disu does a good enough job offensively, goes 8 for 16, gets 19 points. And if you look at the plus-minus, he's probably one of your better players in the plus-minus. When he was on the court, the team just did better. They had better flow offensively, which was a big problem. When Dylan Disu sat down because he gets in foul trouble, that offense just had a really hard time trying to find anything. Spacing became a little bit harder because, you put in a Brock Cunningham with Dylan Mitchell, and they're threatening Brock Cunningham. He shoots 6 threes in that game, goes 1 for 6 because they're leaving him wide open, and he has to take them. Because if you don't take the threes, then they're never going to respect you out there, and you can't play if you can't stretch a court. You can't play with Dylan Mitchell, at least. And Caden Shedrick is in the same spot. He only plays 10 minutes, goes 1 for 2 in the game, doesn't have the impact that he needs to have in that game. We see Kendall Weaver. He's coming in and still doing some work. He doesn't necessarily have the impact on the game that he had the other night, and I think maybe he was trying to do a little too much in this game. I love the energy he brought. I think he did a lot of positive things. However, this was not overall, his impact on the game wasn't necessarily a net positive because he was running around a lot and not necessarily defensively being able to be the impact player. But that's partially, too, because of what BYU did, which is they knew what Texas's weakness was, and they attacked it. And you're going to have to expect that all season until you can find a way to stop it, until you can find a way to play off. And now not everybody can sit out and stretch 5 big and have their big sitting out the 3-point line. Not everybody can play a stretch 5. Not everybody has that in college basketball, so that won't be the case at week in and week out. BYU does have that. BYU wants to get shooters out there, and so even though not everybody was hitting threes, every one of their centers and guards all shot threes throughout the game. We saw Noah Waterman was 3 for 6 in the game. Ali Khalifa wasn't hitting any, but he went 0 for 3. He was still shooting. And so when your bigs are able to shoot threes and Texas is trying to stay out on them, it becomes a problem. And it's something you're going to have to face and fix. It's a learning experience and playing on the road. You have to be able to get through that point when things aren't going your way, the calls are going against you, the fans are against you, and you need to pick up the intensity on the defensive end because, again, this is a defensive loss. You allowed 84 points. You still put up 72. You should be in the game at 72. You shouldn't be getting blown out at 72 points. And that's a defensive lapse. You can't allow 84 points in the Big 12. You just can't. And so defensively, they're going to have to figure out how to block that paint off a little bit more and try and help off when everybody's being told, well, everybody go out on your man, and they just spread 5 wide and drive right at the basket. You can try and stay in front of your guy enough, but they were calling fouls on that as well. They were attacking Max Abmas on both ends on that as well. It was just basically everything that could go wrong game plan wise for Texas did, and they did not pan out. Now the good news for Texas is that they have another game tonight. That's the good news for Texas, is after you shot 23% from the 3-point in the second half and 35% from the field in the second half and let the game get away because you couldn't play offense because your defense was so bad that you kept getting stuck in half-court offenses. And when Dylan Dessou was on the bench, the offense wasn't there. You have another game tonight to rebound. And this lineup, you match up much better with than that BYU lineup that had some bigs that could shoot threes, which really kind of messes up what you like to do because they were able to defend you well enough in the paint. They were able to body you around a little bit in the paint on defense and stretch you out on offense, pulling away your shot protectors, your rim protectors. You get to go up against a Houston team tonight that is going to be a big matchup for Texas to see if they can bounce back. And again, this is a road game in the Big 12. And road games in the Big 12, it is tough for Houston to come in to hopefully you guys have a packed, angry, crazy, supportive, loud Moody Center tonight. They're doing the stripe out, which if you're going to the game tonight and have not heard that there is a stripe out going on and it's white and burnt orange, and you can look on the map on the website to find out what you're supposed to be wearing. I know it may be a little late in the game, but it's white and it's supposed to be white and orange and burnt orange, of course. But that's what you're going to be looking for. Houston, we can say they lost to they beat Kansas State over the weekend. Jamal Sheed ends up with 17 points in that game. But this again, LJ Cryer, Emmanuel Sharp, two guys that are supposed to be big for this Houston team, go 6 for 26. So they did not get their shooting done. This is at Houston. They're going to be over on the road. Can you continue to make LJ Cryer, who used to play for Baylor, who has done well in this building before for Baylor, can you slow them down and keep their production down, play good defense on them, keep Sheed to not being over the top? 17 points is not going to kill you. They do force a lot of turnovers. K-State averages like 16, 17 turnovers. They get 18 in that game. But K-State shot 40% against Houston. And so even though they lost, the real reason they lost was the free throw line discrepancy. It wasn't the defense necessarily on the court for Houston. So this is a game that Texas can still come out in and should put up a decent shot percentage in, because that's not been a problem for them so much this season. K-State shot 40% from the field in that game, but the problem was K-State shot 12 free throws and Houston shot 34. You can't allow that discrepancy. So you're going to have to be good with not picking up stupid fouls, not getting in the penalty too early. Houston is going to try and go inside and bully you around. They're going to try and push you around. Hopefully you get a little home field love and that home court love from the referees, and it'll be a little bit more even. You're going to look at, but this matchup, one of the things you want to look at, a couple pieces to look at for tonight's game to get you on board. Houston has not been necessarily great on the road this season. They've lost to Iowa State. They lost to TCU on the road. And Iowa State just jumped up bigs in the polls, too, after their upset of Kansas this weekend. But you're looking at that as, okay, this is a Houston team that we know doesn't necessarily play their defense and especially offense as well on the road. And this is also great that they don't match up well with Texas in the size department. Texas will be outsized in a lot of matchups, especially in the Big 12, but across the board, they just don't necessarily have the size, especially when you're playing IT Horton in that lineup. And, you know, you're starting basically 2 6-foot guards in Tyrese Hunter and Max Asmus, and then IT Horton comes in, 6'4", something like that. So you don't have a ton of size. The good news is LJ Cryer and Emmanuel Sharp and Jamal Sheed are all about 6'2". They're all about 6 foot, so you're not getting too much height where you can play smaller, which benefits Texas that size. Even their bigs for Houston, they're not 3-point shooters. They're not huge athletically. They're very athletic. They're really good defenders. They're great rebounders, but they're not necessarily scorers at a high level. And their big guys are all 6'8", 6'7". So when you look at it that way, there's matchups for this for Texas that if they can come out with the right intensity and the right frame of mind and not be worried about, losing to BYU on Saturday, not worried about that, just come back out, reset yourself, play this game as its own entity, and go against a Houston team where they've done well against big ranked teams. They've had good matchups. Texas should be able to handle, and I feel better about this matchup than I do against number 21 BYU going into the weekend, when it felt like it was too much confidence going into that game in the weekend. Oh, all we got to do and we'll be able to win, discounting what BYU could do. I don't want to discount what Houston can do, but what Houston can do is play defense. Texas consistently hit a reasonable field goal percentage for games. I know they shot poorly in the second half against BYU. There's been a few games where they've slowed down, not as much at home, because Tyrese Hunter usually plays much better at home as well. If those guys can play well, if Hunter and Max Abmas can shoot well enough, then this opens up the game wide for Texas to be able to get a big upset win over Houston tonight at the Moody Center. A couple other college basketball scores to look at. Kansas did lose to Iowa State. Again, road games in the Big 12 are tough. Hunter Dickinson has 20 points and 15 rebounds, but it was just not enough. Iowa State shot 46% from the three-point range. It was too much for Kansas. They get a 79-75 win. Also, Texas Tech goes on the road to Oklahoma and gets an upset, just like Texas did, 85-84. Texas Tech fighting out just close game after close game in the Big 12 and keeping it rolling right along. They have a lot of help from their bench, and Chance McMillan has 27 points and 8 rebounds. They're just getting help from different places, and that Texas Tech team is fighters. They do not like believing that they are they believe they're underdogs in the Big 12, or at least they believe they shouldn't be underdog. They believe they're underappreciated or underrespected in the Big 12, and they're showing it in a big way that they should be at the conversation to sit at the big table in the Big 12. Let's talk a little NBA before we hit the text line. Recap a little bit what happened over the weekend. The Trailblazers the Spurs played 2 games over the weekend. They beat the Trailblazers 116-110, and then beat the Timberwolves 112-113. It is a back-to-back, which the Spurs are not traditionally great at, especially because Wemby had been on a minutes restriction where he was not allowed to play back-to-backs. That is now apparently over. He played in both games, did well in both games, and a huge win for a Timberwolves team that was up for a lot of the game. The Spurs fought back in the third quarter and were able to pull out a win over the Timberwolves. They go on to play the Wizards tonight. Could put together a win streak for San Antonio. Would be a big game there. The Mavericks had to win 1-1 over the weekend. They, of course, have that 148-143 just offensive fest against the Hawks on Friday. Luka Doncic puts up 73 points in that game. The Kings then beat them 120-115 the next night. Doncic goes 9 for 26 and 28 points. He's shooting about the same amount of shots every game. It's if they're going in or they're not, and he's just not been shooting a huge high percentage in those losses. They're going to be in action tonight, too. We'll get to that in a second. Also, the Rockets play both times over the weekend. They split that series. Rockets go 138-104 over the Hornets. Jalen Green has a really good game against the Hornets for 36 points in that game. The Nets then beat the Rockets 106-104. Just too much from the Nets, and the Rockets kind of, little squandering it down the end. Tonight we get Wizards at the Spurs. Lakers are going to be at the Rockets. This feels like a good time for a turnaround game for the Rockets, who are 3-7 in their last 10, have not been playing great basketball. The Lakers have also not been playing. They just had that big double overtime game on Saturday night against Golden State. This matchup actually does fit pretty well for the Rockets. It's an opponent that you can get up for, but they're not, at their top of their game right now, the Lakers. It feels like a good get-right game for the Rockets to maybe set them up going in to this stretch right before the All-Star break. And the Magic are at the Mavericks tonight as well. Kyrie Irving is out for this game again. He's expected to come back at the end of the month, early next month, from that sprained thumb that was making him less effective on the court. We'll see. Luka Doncic seems to play better when he has a day off before, so we'll see if he's able to come out and score the points against the Magic tonight. It really all just depends. When we look at what the Mavs are now, is how, does Luka Doncic hit 15 shots or does he hit 8 shots? Because if he hits 15, they're probably going to win. And if he hits 8, they're probably going to lose. Like, it's such a thin margin for him of what he can do and his shot percentage, because he's going to take the shots. So it's how many he makes, not how many he takes, because he's going to take them. But a good shot for the Mavericks to get another win against a Magic team that is good but inconsistent and not great on the road. All right. We want to get to the text line, so why don't we hit up the big fat poll of the day so we can get to the text line.
Patrick's big fat poll of the day on the Horn.
512-447-3776. I've not looked at it yet, but I'm assuming somebody has said something about Rodney Terry, so we'll get into that. I'm sure somebody has said something, but we'll talk about it. But this is not about Rodney Terry. This is because over the weekend. A huge sports story. The Spurs Coyote caught his third bat on the court in San Antonio. It's a crazy thing that keeps happening, that there's bats at now it's Frost Bank Center. Is it the Frost Bank Center now, I think? But there's bats that are in there. They will come down every once in a while, and once they get on the court, they basically stay down on the court area, and you have to catch them. Manu once caught one and then said never again because of all the shots he had to get after the game. He was not a fan of that, so they send out the Coyote in his Batman suit with a net flying around the court, which has to make visiting teams look over and like, that's their solution for this? And like, we know he clearly is, he's ready because they had the Batman suit like ready to go. And so he comes out, catches a bat, third bat caught. Spurs Coyote, by far the best mascot. I'm going to open up for you, though. If you guys have one that you think's better than the Coyote, you're wrong. But I'll ask you, who's the best mascot in sports? Let me know on the text line, 512-447-3776. And, of course, if you want to talk Texas basketball, Big 12 basketball, NBA basketball, we're going to talk a lot of NFL coming up in the 5 o'clock hour as well. We'll play some sound from Ian Rob B from this morning talking NFL as well in the next segment. But we're going to take a break. When we come back, we'll hit up the text line a little bit, and then we'll start to get into Ian Rob B. We'll keep the show rolling here on the Sports Complex on the Horn 1019, AM 1260, the Horn app, and hornfm.com. Back on the Sports Complex here on a Monday afternoon, a musical theme of the week. The Grammys are this weekend, so everyone we're playing this week is a Grammy Award winner with at least 10 Grammys. Double-digit Grammys for everyone we're playing this week. I was going to play the bands that are, nominated this year and try and keep us relevant, and then I realized I'm not a very relevant guy, and I don't keep up with stuff it's popular today. So I didn't want to play a bunch of music I don't know and know. Thought I'd go and play some classics. That just for me. Some Aretha Franklin. She had the most Grammys for a while. She's now been passed. The most Grammys for a female artist for a long time. She's now been passed by Alison Krauss and Beyonce. Beyonce now holding the record, I think, for everyone of most Grammys. So we'll hear her later in the week as well. But yes, all double-digit Grammy winners all week long on the show. Text line real quick. We'll get to one, and then we'll play this sound from Hook 'Em Up, and then we'll get to more when we get to the next segment. But Man Chan said Texas basketball, Dillon Mitchell and Tyrese Hunter are a liability with no offense this past weekend. BYU is sagging in on defense. Concerned tonight. And Houston guards are built like linebackers, going to muscle our guards. They'll bump around, and Texas just has to be able to sell it to the refs. But I'm not as worried about that because I think Max Abmas and Tyrese Hunter can get around some of those guys. And you want to pass around, and you want to throw the ball inside and make them score inside. You just need to keep Dylan Disu out of foul trouble. That was a big problem. And to Tyrese Hunter, he was not a liability. He played a better game than Max Abmas did. Just balled. I mean, just flat out. He played a better game offensively and defensively than Max Abmas did. He was 4 for 7 from the field, 2 for 4 from 3. None of that is bad. We know he wasn't taking a ton of shots, so there was some he passed up on because he doesn't want to take a bad shot. But at 2 for 4, I can't complain. He also had 6 assists in the game. So Max Abmas, who goes 4 for 12, 2 from 7 from 3, and has 2 assists, that's a worse game. And if you want to look at the plus minus, I mean, he's only -3. That lineup with IT Horton, Max Abmas, Dillon Mitchell, Kendall Weaver, and Caden Shedrick, who just doesn't look like he's mentally in the game right now. Like, he's just not thinking quick enough in the game. And I don't know. He was doing it earlier in the season. It seems like something where it may be just he's in a lot of pain with his back, but he doesn't seem like he's moving the same way. That lineup was really when BYU pushed away and Texas wasn't able to get back in the game. But that was kind of when BYU pushed away, was when Dylan Disu gets in foul trouble, and it kind of messed up the rotation they wanted to use. And they had to give some rest to some guys and with fouls, and it just ended up really hurting them. But Tyrese Hunter was not a liability in that game. He was our better point guard than Max Abmas in that game. I mean, Max Abmas hits big shots, and he'll get better, but has to be way more consistent on the road to be that guy, especially once you get into tournament time, to see what Max Abmas is capable of doing. But he did not look like it last night. He was a bigger liability than Tyrese Hunter. I want to play some sound, though, from Hook 'Em Up with Ian Rob B. It's a replay we do here on the show. They were talking about the games. We'll get into our coverage of the games at 5 o'clock, but here is a little take from Ian Rob B this morning.
I said this earlier in the show. I'm done picking against Patrick Mahomes. I mean, the guy's just too damn good. And we're talking about the greatest start to a career for any pro athlete in American pro sports history. And when he's an underdog, and by the way, he's going to be an underdog because I think technically right now he is an underdog. That could end up by the Super Bowl, by the time the Super Bowl gets here and kickoff. It could end up being a pick'em, or it could end up flipping totally. But I believe right now Kansas City was a 1-point underdog to a 1.5-point dog to the San Francisco 49ers. And that would make 3 weeks in a row where Patrick Mahomes was an underdog. I don't think that's ever happened in his career. I'll give you some numbers. The last time you go look at it with Patrick Mahomes. So now totally Patrick Mahomes is 9-3 straight up in his career as an underdog after the last win over Lamar Jackson and the Ravens on the road. That's the best record for any QB in the Super Bowl era with a minimum of 10 starts. And it is you go look at it, I believe that Ravens game was the 6th time that Mahomes opened as a underdog of 3 or more. This obviously against the 49ers, just going to be a 1-point dog. But the Chiefs were at least, I think to start, at least a 3-point underdog to Lamar Jackson and the Ravens. And he is now 6-0 in those games. He's 6-0 whenever he's a dog of at least 3 points, and he's 9-3 straight up in his career as an underdog. And if you go look at it, Mahomes is 11 games as an underdog. Now 12 games as an underdog. So he's just been fantastic. Like like I said, picking against Patrick Mahomes is just not wise, and I probably shouldn't do it again. But for him to be an underdog in 3 straight weeks, I'll go back and look at it, but there's no way we've seen that happen in Patrick Mahomes' career. And honestly, by the time Super Bowl gets here, I'm not sure if they'll be an underdog. So picking against Patrick Mahomes, not smart. But also, there's something else about, we talked about this about Brock Purdy playing some of his best football in critical moments. You got to give it up for the Kansas City Chiefs because they've been limited in their weapons so far this year. We talked about them having the weakest wide receiving core that Patrick Mahomes has had since he's been there with Andy Reid. They have found a way almost in every matchup to highlight a different player, right? I mean, this past week, it was Travis Kelce, right? Travis Kelce, 11 targets, 11 receptions, 116 yards. That's how they beat Baltimore. But remember that game that Isaiah Pacheco had? and that win over Buffalo, and that win over Miami, those guys. You go look at Isaiah Pacheco now, 254 rushing yards in the playoffs. Travis Kelce, 262 receiving yards. And give it up for Rashee Rice. He has 223 receiving yards in the playoffs. So everything is really concentrated. Like their offensive productivity is really concentrated because they don't have a lot of great weapons. But Andy Reid has found a hell of a way to scheme open Travis Kelce, to scheme things for Isaiah Pacheco in the running game, who just runs like he's mad at the grass, and Rashee Rice. And we talked about how Rashee Rice was trending. Rashee Rice is clearly like if you look at scheme-wise, the number one guy for Andy Reid and for Patrick Mahomes right now. So it's amazing what the Kansas City Chiefs have been able to do, and they did that against the number one defense. And by the way, that Bills defense was a pretty good defense. I mean, that was one of the better defenses in the NFL, and they carved up that defense too. And so Patrick Mahomes right now is just playing on a whole nother level. He's on a different planet. And you got to that point where Tom Brady was at this point too, where yes, Tom Brady had his weapons, but he didn't need many of them. He just needed like one or two of his guys. He needed Gronk, or he needed Edelman. You know what I mean? He didn't need a lot of guys. When he had his best complement of weapons, he didn't even win the Super Bowl, right? You just talked about how Spagnuolo had a great defensive game plan for the Giants, and when he had Randy Moss and Wes Welker and all those really great weapons in 2007, and they went undefeated throughout the regular season, Tom Brady didn't win the Super Bowl. When Tom Brady was winning Super Bowls, his weapons, uptime, he often uplifted the play of the weapons around him. He made the receivers around him better, and I think Patrick Mahomes might be venturing into that category now, where he can just able to uplift the play of other players around him. Guys like Marquez Valdes-Scantling, Rashee Rice, they may not have tremendous upside, and they may not be guys who are drafted really high in the draft, but Patrick Mahomes is just that good that he can make those guys even better. But what that game came down to with the Baltimore Ravens, and I said this last week, and I should have put more importance on it, but we mentioned so much stuff when we're previewing these matchups, so we're just trying to get in as much of the analysis as we can. I said that Ravens play a lot of zone defense. They play more zone defense and better zone defense than anybody in the league. They're more effective playing zone, and it's a matchup zone, pattern match zone. So all these guys are great at passing routes off in coverage. And I said that pattern match zone they're really good at may not matter if the chemistry between Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce is so good and they're able to find the vulnerabilities in that zone. Well, that's exactly what they did all game long. And finally, the Ravens figured it out, and I think they started to match up more man, play some man concepts on Travis Kelce, and you can zone up the rest of it if you want to. But that was a little bit too late because early on in the game, and when they needed a for sure conversion, they needed a clutch play. I'm watching Patrick Mahomes' 9-second scramble drill to get Travis Kelce a target on third down to keep one of their touchdown drives alive early in the game, and they end up scoring that second touchdown. That kind of chemistry, I don't know if there's anything anybody can do about it. I don't know if there's anything the 49ers can do about that kind of chemistry. Here, Longhorn fans, we remember watching that kind of bromance between a quarterback and a receiver when we watched Colt McCoy and Jordan Shipley. Now imagine that to the nth degree. Imagine that with the greatest tight end of all time and maybe, all right, one of the GOATs, young GOATs of all time at quarterback too. Chemistry is highly underrated. And that just showed you it didn't matter. They were going up against the number one defense in the league. Number one defense in the league can't stop Kelsey and Mahomes. I don't know if there's anybody that can stop Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelsey. I don't know if that defense exists.
Yeah. Well, and again, I mean, everything you just say is spot on. But and the clutch gene, it's their time of year, much like it was Tom Brady's time of year. And I think the comparisons are there. And I know it's like early in the year we talked about. It feels like Brett Veach and the Chiefs are going to try to copy what Belichick and Brady did, which is right. I mean, We've got this all-time quarterback who's all-time clutch, who makes huge plays when we need him. The initial thought would be, well, let's surround him with great offensive players.
Yep.
Or you go to, because in a salary cap league, you can't do everything, right? You can't. So they first rebuilt the offensive line because they got to the Super Bowl and couldn't block anybody because their line all got hurt.
Tampa Bay exposed.
Yeah, and Tampa Bay exposed their protection. So they fixed that. And now it's been about the defense. And to your point about re-signing Chris Jones, they have to do that. But this is the Belichick-Brady model that if we play stingy defense, really well coached with Steve Spagnuolo, who's really underrated, and then we have this guy and this other guy, Travis Kelsey, like he had Gronk, we're going to win these games. We're going to win these games because we're going to be the calm team. We're going to be schemed up and ready to go, and we got this guy. And Brady did it for 20 years. And you saw how good he was once that guy left.
Yeah, didn't even matter. He still was good. I think Patrick Mahomes, if Andy Reid decides to retire, I think he'll still be good.
He will. If you that was my suggestion last week, was keep Spagnuolo to run the defense, make him the head coach, and then hire a great young offensive mind to work with Mahomes.
Or bring Bieniemy back.
Or hire Eric Bieniemy.
Bring Bieniemy back. Let him call the plays.
Because it's, defense still wins championships in my mind, and it's an offensive league. But as we saw yesterday, you still have to play high level defense. And you know who else is making a lot of money? This run and the trends of the copycat NFL run? Tight ends.
Yep.
JT Sanders.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Sam Laporta is as good as it gets. George Kittle. Obviously, Travis Kelsey. Mark Andrews is a really good player trying to work his way back. And that's the only part of the thing, because the Chiefs were great yesterday in those first couple drives. But that game was there to be won. If you tell any Ravens fan we held them to 17 and none in the second, we win that game. And they didn't. And that's credit to the defense of the Chiefs, and then just the shrinkage nature of the Ravens right now, because they didn't rise up and take that game when it was there for them. So,
I was just talking about the line, and because Patrick Mahomes is an underdog, third playoff game in a row, he's an underdog, which is just wild. The line, the 49ers started off at a 2.5-point favorite, and now they're just a 1-point favorite.
Oh, so it's come down.
It's come down drastically in just 24 hours. No, actually less than 24 hours. That was overnight. So I think by the time that game kicks off, Kansas City Chiefs may be a favorite.
Maybe. Well, it's funny.
So take it right now, people. Take it.
Well, the best bettors, the sharps, right? They get on it early because that's usually when you're going to get your best line.
Yep.
And gosh, half a point, those are huge swings when the game's going to be this close. It just really is, and to get that, because you won't get that line again.
No.
So if you can get it early, that's where you want to be. But either way, look again. This Chiefs dynamic is remarkable. It's very Brady Belichick like, and Steve Spagnuolo, man, what a stud, absolute stud. What they do, Rod. You were a corner. Their corners are so sticky.
They are. Yep.
I mean, they are really, really good. And this guy Trent McDuffie, who they took in the first round out of Washington. He gives no space, man. That guy is up on you, and I think I first noticed it early in the season when they played Jacksonville. I remember Jacksonville at the time was pretty healthy with Trevor Lawrence, and they got all those real good receivers. And man, no one was open. Nobody was open. They're really impressive what they do at all three levels, and that's credit to that coaching staff and to the drafting that they've done.
Yeah, credit to Veach, man.
Which is why it'll be a great matchup in the Super Bowl, right? I mean, you got Ayuk and Debo, and you've got. It's going to be a fun football game, and it'll probably come down to Mahomes v. Purdy, and we'll see. I got to go Mahomes.
I was going to say, well, that's an easy decision. That's what I said. If we're going Mahomes versus Purdy, that's an easy decision, but we'll see. I mean, Spagnuolo, we just don't give him enough props, and if he can find a way to neutralize that multiplicity and that multiple attack for San Fran, man, we got to start just putting that dude in the Hall of Fame just as a coordinator because what he's done so far.
Oof, awesome.
Right?
Well,
and considering going back to his time with the Giants.
Yeah, to pair him with Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes, and that's why they're looking to go back to back and go back to back in Super Bowls because that's as good as it gets as far as the coaching.
Is he the best? We got to talk about. Is he the best DC in the league? Are we not giving him enough? Who's the best DC in the league? Who's the best coordinator? Defensive coordinator.
I would right now.
Dan Quinn was in the conversation. Mike McDonald's in the conversation. D'Amico was, but now those guys are head coaches now. So I'm talking about as a coordinator right now, defensive coordinator. Is he the best?
Him or Dan Quinn? I think Dan Quinn's going to come back. I don't think we've talked about this today. I think it's 99% sure that Dan Quinn will be back as DC for the Cowboys.
Oh, you think Mike McDonald's going to get the Seattle job?
I think Dan Quinn would have been hired by now if he was.
I do too. I think they were waiting.
They wanted to interview this other guy too, which I think you're right about.
Well, there was some thought in Seattle. I read a bunch over the weekend that John Schneider's in charge of the hire, and he wasn't going to hire until he could sit face to face with Mike McDougal. He wanted to talk to them. It still may swing back to Dan Quinn when it's all said and done.
If he has a terrible interview.
Yeah, if it doesn't go well, and his defense made great adjustments yesterday again.
Yeah, but Spagnuolo might be the best DC in the league right now.
Well, again,
Dan Quinn's in the conversation, but would you take Spags or Dan Quinn?
I would take Spagnuolo.
I think I'll take Spags right now, and I love me some Dan Quinn.
Spags what you've seen him do the last couple of years and rebuilding this Chiefs defense, but also. Again, 2007 Patriots, highest scoring offense of all time. Tom Brady, 50 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. Randy Moss.
Wes Welker.
He beat him.
He did.
He beat him. They were going 19-0, and then he beat him. He was the architect of that defensive game plan that stopped Tom Brady. And he's still doing it. As a head coach, it didn't work for him, but at the same time, as far as scheming up D, I mean, you're a defensive guy, Rod. It's about as good as it gets right there.
I like Lou Anarumo, too, from Cincinnati. He's one of my – he's just great in the playoffs. But, right, I mean, if it's not Spags, I mean, honestly, I don't know who I would take ahead of Spags. I'll say that right now.
Really good.
Yeah.
Good stuff there from Hook 'em Up with Ian Rob B. You can catch him weekday morning 6 to 11 right here on The Horn. We're going to take a quick break. We'll come back and hit the text line. The poll of the day, who is the best mascot in the NBA? Because of Spurs, Coyote caught a third bat. That is a third bat, and we know I'm not just because I'm a Spurs fan, and since I was a kid, I love the Coyote. That's not it. Not just because I have a Coyote doll from my childhood that was in my office, it's in my bedroom. It's not just that. We just know he's the best mascot. So if you want to dispute that, feel free. I'm just going to say I just expect a lot of people to text in Spurs Coyote. Is the poll today, 512-447-3776. If you want to talk about that big Texas basketball game last night, the big game tonight, you can text in about that too. The NBA as well we've talked about. We will get into more NFL. We just heard some NFL talk there from Rod and Aaron. We'll get into that as well in the 5 o'clock. So if any of that you want to talk about, 512-447-3776. When we come back, we'll start hitting up the text line here on the Sports Complex on the Horn 1019 AM 1260, the Horn app, and hornfm.com. Back on the Sports Complex here on a Monday afternoon, playing musical theme of the week, playing artists and bands that have won double-digit Grammys. Vince Gill won a bunch of Grammys. That's some Vince Gill playing Grammys because the Grammys are this weekend. So we'll be playing those artists that all have double-digit Grammy wins all week long here on the Sports Complex. Text line is open. 512-447-3776 is the text line number. If you want to join the conversation with us, we're going to go there right now. Texter says, Frost Bank Center is the worst arena in the NBA. Alamo Dome never had bats. As someone who's spent plenty of time at both, I've been to many games at both. The Frost Bank Center. Now, the Frost Bank Center is now getting older, and they're going to be talking about getting a new building. That's one of the reasons why getting Wemby was so big for the Spurs in San Antonio, because it meant okay, well, now San Antonio will most likely build them a new building. So there probably will be a new building pretty soon. And I'm sure they'll try and not have bats in it, but who knows if that's a doable thing in San Antonio. But yeah, it's much better than the Alamo Dome. And if you go back to the Alamo Dome now too, it's always that part where you're walking through and there's just stuff shut down and it just kind of looks run down all the time and half the toilets don't work. It used to be. I mean, it was cool when it was new. But also, you had those the NBA Finals in '99. It was cool because then you could fit this insane amount of people in there because they had that big blue curtain that covered over half it, and they just kind of wheeled it in a little bit, and they sold tickets all the way further back, and it got really loud. But yeah, for most games there, it was just too big, to really. Because man, it was a football. It's a football stadium. They just put up a tarp put up a big curtain in the middle of. It was not necessarily the greatest place to go see a basketball game, but it was, it worked for San Antonio. It seemed like a very San Antonio thing to go there. Our texter says, "I've got your back, buddy. Big fat pull today is Lamar Jackson, the Dak Prescott of Baltimore, or is Dak Prescott the Lamar Jackson of Dallas?" Just trying to kick both guys while they're down. I'll get into it more in the 5 o'clock hour, but I am not putting this loss. Lamar Jackson choked at the end, and he didn't have his best game, but I don't think the game plan was necessarily the best game plan either. I don't know if that was Todd Monken's best work putting together the game plan that he had, expecting, when you're okay, well, we're going to make an otherworldly performance of this guy. So do something you haven't done all season, and do something and be dynamic this way. And it did not work out. But I get it. Look, they're both up for MVP. There's worse scenarios to have than have two guys that are up for MVP. And Brock Purdy is, that's a system, and he's in it. He's not bad. I'm not taking shots at Brock Purdy, but I think if you put Dak Prescott and Lamar Jackson in San Francisco, they'd be just as good. And Patrick Mahomes is Patrick Mahomes. At this point, I'm done. It was about halfway through that game where you're just why do I bet against Patrick Mahomes? Why do I keep saying, oh, no, Baltimore's just a much better team? But I'll get into that more in the 5 o'clock hour. But I like your joke. As Lamar Jackson, the Dak Prescott of Baltimore, or is Dak Prescott the Lamar Jackson of Dallas? I'll tell you this. I think Lamar Jackson's going to have a second MVP on his hands, though, and I don't know if Dak's ever going to quite get to that level of getting an MVP. Right Guy from New Mexico says, well, Bevo is definitely a legendary mascot, and that's true, and that is a live mascot. I was talking more of the I don't know, the not live type. They're still live, but they're in costume. Maybe costume type. Is costume type the word I'm looking for? That would be Hookem. Hookem is the costume version of Bevo that shows up, which is Hookem's great too. He's just no Coyote. But I also like Gritty from the Philadelphia Flyers. Gritty as the look of Gritty. I don't know if I've seen enough stuff of Gritty actually doing great, the above and beyond, other than, the kick in the dirt. That's where you go with the Philadelphia Fanatic and those. He kind of does the same stuff as that. So it's great because he's just a crazy looking mascot. But he's still no Coyote. Coyote was still the right answer. Texter says, I thought for sure the only way BYU was beating UT was with the 3 ball. I guess they flipped the script. They did, exactly. And that's one of those things when you walked in the game and I kept talking to people and everybody's like, well, no, BYU, this is all they do. Like, they're not as good as they are because they only have one thing that they're good at. It was they were able to find the area, and again, I thought it was a poorly officiated game. And it's just because of the way I like the game called. So it made I think those ticky-tack fouls, they kept getting into the paint just because they're smaller guys, and they go flying in there and then hit the ground afterwards. I'm like, man, those shouldn't be called. You're really hurting the team when you're getting guys in foul trouble for being next to, for just contesting a shot, and that'll get you on the put you on the bench contesting shots, which then makes you even harder to contest anything because you're like, well, if I get over there, they're calling the foul on me at this point because I'm coming over late because I'm standing on a guy in the 3-point line. It just became really hard to defend, and they just never really found the way. And I think at a certain point, you were so worried, like this texter says, that they were going to hit threes on you that you kind of had to pull one off and go into more of a zone, and they just didn't seem to want to go into that in that game. And it may be that they didn't feel that the zone was going to work either, and they were going to get shot out of the zone. They didn't want to get shooting, and by the time you got in the second half, it was already too late, and that's when the points in the paint kind of slowed down a little bit then. But it was too much for BYU, for Texas to overcome. That offense never really got back on track. All right, let's take a quick break. When we come back, we will talk some NFL more. The text line 512-447-3776. And we'll get into Conference Championship Week here on the Sports Complex on the Horn 1019, AM 1260, the Horn app, and hornfm.com. Hour 2 here on the Sports Complex. Text line's open, 512-447-3776. You want to talk Texas basketball? Big game tonight, tough game on Saturday. You can talk about either one. You want to talk some NBA? Trade deadline is looming about a week and a half away. Spurs could start a win streak, 3 games in a row. That could happen tonight. You want to talk some NBA? Big fat poll today. Who's the best mascot in the league? We're talking because the Coyote caught his third bat. They send the mascot out to catch the bat. So that's our poll today. Who's the best mascot? The correct answer is the Coyote. We all know that. And we're going to talk some NFL as well. So if you've got any takes on the NFL, on the coaching hirings, on where Dan Quinn may or may not be ending up at the end of this year, if you're okay with him coming back to the Cowboys, if he can fix his mistakes that cost the Cowboys, and, of course, the conference championship games. All of that come up here in hour 2 of the Sports Complex. We'll get back to the text line in just a minute, 512-447-3776. We try to get to everybody's text on the show. That's why we say you guys drive the show. I just try to keep it on the rails because we want to get to everybody that text in. All right. Let's get into a little talk about the conference championship games this weekend. We'll start with the AFC. It was the first game. This was a game that the Ravens had every opportunity to win. We talked a little bit about it in that last segment, but this is a game where as much as the Ravens had every opportunity to win, there were some things that you just didn't expect to happen that happened in the game. The 3 turnovers, one of which was just a really bad read by Lamar Jackson. One of those was the ball getting swiped from behind him, which that one I'll put into it shouldn't have happened. You know, you have to be able to have that awareness, especially a guy like Lamar Jackson. But, you know, him being able to – but it falls into this next point I'll make. And then, of course, the fumble as well on the goal line, which is just devastating when you realize you lose by a touchdown and you are reaching out to score that touchdown and get that ball poked out at the end. A great play, by the way, a great play on defense. To realize you're not stopping the play, just poke at the ball and hope for the best. But the reality is the game plan for the Ravens, and I know the Chiefs wanted to come out and Spags came out and we've talked about how great of a defensive coordinator he is. I know they came out and they really wanted to stop the run, and they were going to try and stop Lamar Jackson, and they were going to do what they could to make sure there was no run game for the Baltimore Ravens. And the Ravens said, don't worry about it. We're not going to run the ball. We're one of the best running teams in the NFL. We can run the ball, but we're going to spread the ball out and we're going to throw it. And I'm going to have Lamar Jackson throw the ball 37 times. That, to me, is not what the game plan should have been when you know you're going up against a really good defense, everything. Try and run the ball some more. You had 6 carries combined by Gus Edwards and Hill. Edwards and Hill had 6 carries combined, 3 for each. Gus Edwards, I mean, he had 20 yards. He had a 15-yard run. He broke 1, and then 2 were shorter carries. So you say, well, screw it. He had, out of 3, he only had 1 big run. You can't abandon your run game in a 1-score game and continue to play from behind and continue to stop. When you hold Kansas City to 17 points, you cannot abandon your run game and just keep throwing the ball because, again, it made it so you couldn't set up the deep ball where you need to set it up. I just don't think the game plan of we're going to let Lamar Jackson go out there and show us. You go and this is a problem I've said, and, the text earlier made the joke about Dak Prescott. This is the story. If you get a quarterback and their name's not Patrick Mahomes, and you say, well, we're going to use them, but let's use them in a way that it's not proven, that we don't think is probably the best way to use them, but we think that maybe they'll be able to elevate. But the odds are they'll regress to the mean instead of elevating to be the greatest player against a really good defense in the most important game. I don't like that game plan. Run the ball. And Lamar Jackson had 8 carries in there, but those are not all designed carries either. So you're calling, 10 runs in the game maybe? I just don't, I can't stand calling 10 run plays really is probably what you call in that game. I don't like that game plan one bit for a Ravens team. That's what they're built on. And it leads to turnovers because it leads to interceptions. It leads to Lamar Jackson sitting in the pocket and trying to get the ball downfield and getting ball piped out. It leads to Lamar Jackson getting hit more times than you want to see him get hit in a game. I mean, he had a great play. By the way, Lamar Jackson also has a reception in that game, which was just a crazy moment to not only see him catch his own pass, but to get your zone pass past the line of scrimmage and then run it for a big gain. I was trying to figure out what the fantasy score is. If you know that one, hit me up on the text line. What the fantasy, how many points he could have scored if he would have kept that and gone to the end zone. Does he get a touchdown passing and receiving in that in fantasy? I don't know if he does or not, but it doesn't matter. But you had your defense did their job. Baltimore's defense did the job. Baltimore's defense, first of all, they sacked Mahomes twice, which doesn't happen. They almost had that third one on a third down where they're an inch away from hitting Mahomes, and he somehow gets the ball out to Travis Kelce, who's diving for the ball, and they get a first down. Like those plays, that's just when you're watching the Chiefs football and you just go, crap. They're really good. You still hold them to 17 points. It looked like it was going to be high scoring early, and you hold them to 17 points. You have 3 turnovers, and you lose by 10 because you didn't run the football. I don't think it's one of those things. And we can add in the penalties, and that it's probably a bit screwy that there was a 15-yard taunting penalty that shouldn't have been there in a conference championship game, that there was a 15-yard penalty on Kyle Van Noy for when Travis Kelce's doing something that was more offensive than the 15-yard penalty. And I know they didn't want it to get chippy, but you can't throw a flag on only one team if you don't want it to get chippy when both teams are talking. I didn't like those flags. But that's, again, they had 8 penalties for 95 yards. Those backed them up and put them into unfortunate situations. That if Zay Flowers maybe doesn't get that taunting penalty, the whole him diving over the end zone doesn't become an issue. So they shot themselves in the foot plenty, and I think they still could have won if they just ran the ball more. And, you get away from it, but this was the Sark a couple years ago or last year. Sark, when he gets too pretty and gets away from the run and just says, no, we're just going to throw. I know we have to make a throw because I've got all these passes lined up, and we're throwing against a team with what's really good defensive backs that have been playing great all season. And they just kept running, and they just kept throwing the football. 37 attempts for Lamar Jackson was not the recipe to win in a cold and rainy Baltimore game where you should be able to go into the line of scrimmage and try and beat them and try and push them back and try and demand and be bruisers. You're a Harbaugh, be a bruiser. Didn't want to do it. Tried to finesse their way, and they lose because the better team is going to win if you're going to try and finesse. And Kansas City just knows how to win in those games, and you try to finesse your way in instead of being the team that Baltimore is supposed to be in hard hitting and smash mouth. And you got away from it. You got too cute, and it ends up costing Baltimore, and the Chiefs make it back to the Super Bowl. In the NFC game, we see a 49ers team that somewhat underperformed. The Lions definitely underperformed in this game. David Montgomery, though, goes 15 carries for 93 yards, averaging 6.2 yards per carry. You got to ride that. But the real story of the game is going for it on 4th down. They're 1 for 3 on going for it on 4th down. And Dan Campbell can come out today and say, that's what got us there, and that's what we're going to continue to do. But it was just too many times that, you go with 7:03 left in the third quarter. You're up 24-10. You have a chance to make it a 3-score game. Really put pressure on them. Really start to take CMC out of the game more. Make them throw the ball. Make Brock Purdy beat you. Make Brock Purdy be the guy. And you go for it because you want to make it a 3-touchdown game. You want to run more clock or whatever it is. You go for it. You don't get it. It ends up coming to bite you in the butt. 7:32 left in the game. You go for it instead of going for a field goal from the 30 that could have tied the game. Could have tied the game with 7.5 minutes. So 7 minutes left in the third. You could have gone up 3 scores. You say no field goal then. 7:30 left in the game. You don't go for it. You go for it again there. And then you get the ball back. You're still in it with 3 minutes left. You're down 2 scores now because you couldn't kick those field goals because you didn't want to get ahead. You didn't want to push them and trust your defense. You didn't want to do that, even though people are looking at your defensive coordinator, and your defensive coordinator may end up getting a job somewhere. Aaron Glenn is sought after, but you don't trust Aaron Glenn. 3:02, you get the ball back, and you just walk down the field. And you have to bring this up because we give Mike McCarthy a lot of crap for this. Here in Texas, we give Mike McCarthy a ton of crap that his game management down the line. And this looked like Mike McCarthy game management, that they just kind of went down and he said, man, you really need to try and get in there before the 2-minute warning. And you need to get down. And even if you just get in field goal range and kick a field goal before the 2-minute warning, you can punt the ball off, trust your defense, 3 timeouts, 2-minute warning, you're ready to go. You can go tie the game at the end there. And that's what you need. And I know Dan Campbell doesn't like overtime. Dan Campbell doesn't want to, he may have gone for 2 if that was the case. We know who Dan Campbell is. But you have that game management. We all know that. And they just let it go down. And then they let it get under the 2-minute warning. And then they have to burn a timeout. So now the 2-minute warning is going and you burn a timeout. So now you have to onside kick it. And once you're there, you've lost. You've lost because of coaching at that point. And you were in the game and there was a lot of great points. But you got too cute. And you said, well, this is what our bread and butter is. This is what we're going to do. And at the end of the day, the coaches who knew to just stick to their script and do what they did and go with the flow of the game and understand how to move and change and trust their players and on both sides of the field, those guys were winners. Kyle Shanahan, Andy Reid, guys who've been there before, they've done that. And look, Kyle Shanahan's guilty too. He's guilty, but he knows he lost that Super Bowl, and I'm sure it still kills him. He knows to not get too cute in those moments. And, hey, we can still go win this game. Dan Campbell got too cute. Todd Monken got too cute. Calling run plays at the end of the game for Detroit when you have to, when the clock means everything. Not trying to get the ball out. Not trying to get up and spike it. Not trying to do any of that. Just playing really lackadaisical time management you cannot do if you are in that position in the NFL. So it ends up that we get a 49ers Chiefs Super Bowl, which once the Chiefs won, there was a bit of me, I think in the other people I talked to, that you said, well, you got to want the 49ers to win now. As much as I wanted Detroit to win, and the story's better if Detroit wins, I don't think Detroit has a shot against the Chiefs. I don't trust Detroit against Patrick Mahomes. I just don't trust him. 49ers, I'm not falling for them. I'm not falling for the banana in the tailpipe again. Patrick Mahomes, we get it. We get who you are. I'm not betting against you. But 49ers, they at least have a shot in this game. They have a ton of people around them. And if Brock Purdy can play at a high level in a big game, and that defense can actually go and create. Now we know our boy Charles Omenihu, former intern here at the Horn. Charles Omenihu played at Texas, of course. He gets terrible news today that he ends up tearing his ACL in the game, not able to come back in. You saw him on the sideline where he was trying to rub it. He was just trying to figure it out. And the news came out today. He tore his ACL, so he's going to be out for the Super Bowl. Hate to see that. But can one of these defensive lines change the Super Bowl? When you're talking about, all the offensive weapons, you have Kyle Shanahan coming in with his barrage of weapons on the defensive end, and you have Chris Jones in this Kansas City defense and Spags being able to make a big difference on that side. What are you able to do in this game? I'm looking forward to it. We'll keep covering it. It's 2 weeks away. We got plenty of time to get into it. But if you have any takes you want to talk about for these games, if you have a theory or if you think I'm wrong that these coaches maybe didn't make the right game plans and didn't, we saw the inexperience in the playoffs catch up with both of these teams. If you don't think that's true, hit me up. 512-447-3776 is the text line number. If you got something you want to say about in the NFL. Texter says, somebody please tell Dan Campbell that he's not allowed to kick a field goal already. The analytics on that are wrong. Or that he is allowed to kick a field goal already. The analytics are wrong. Momentum is a thing. It fell apart for Detroit after that first bad decision. Yeah, and that's true, too. Momentum is a huge part of all these games. In momentum, when you talk about going forward and getting stopped in those plays where, 3 scores, you could have been up 3 scores in that game. And, and it shows your defense. How much for Dan Campbell when you go out there and you go, I do not trust you guys to be able to slow San Francisco down enough to us hold a 3-score lead in the second half, halfway through the third quarter. That it's a complete lack of trust on your defense. And I know you can say, well, it means more trust because you're trying to go through and pick up for it. It's less trust because they got to run out on the field. They were expecting you to kick a field goal and they could go get ready and get out there. I agree with you completely there. I agree with you completely. Let's take a quick break. We'll come back. We'll get into the text line more. We'll play a little sound from behind the burner curtain as well. All that coming back up on the Sports Complex in the Horn 1019, AM 1260, the Horn app, and hornfm.com. Back on Sports Complex here on a Monday afternoon. Text lines open 512-447-3776. Hope if anybody's going out to the game tonight at the Moody Center, you got the heads up about the stripe out. It'll be interesting to see that on TV tonight. The main attraction at 8 o'clock tonight on TV in the sports world is going to be the stripe out at Moody, Texas versus Houston. A good matchup for Texas. A lot of positive sides of how they match up together. Good opportunity for Texas to have a big bounce back and finish a very hard stretch playing 4 ranked teams in a row. Back to back, this will be a big win for Texas. So you hope that they're going to be able to pull it out tonight. We'll talk about it tomorrow more, where we can see what happens tonight. But we'll get there. We'll get there. Text line is open. We do have Texas basketball is back to being garbage because a hater. We know one of your haters out there. We get it. We get it. You don't watch basketball. If you did, you maybe watch other games, but you're not gonna watch. You can just say they're bad. You can say they're garbage. If you're gonna hate, you're gonna hate. Text says the San Diego Chicken is still undefeated in our poll of the day. Who's the best mascot? It's the Coyote's better than the San Diego Chicken. He just is. San Diego Chicken. He was cool. He's an innovator. He's a legend. He's a Hall of Famer. He's no Coyote. He's no Coyote. Give him a bat. Put a bat in an arena and see if the San Diego Chicken. He'll make it funny. He's not going to make it funny and catch the bat. That's the Coyote difference that you're going to get. Go down with the ship on this one. Text says, you can say what you want about not kicking field goals. I believe he should have kicked them. His biggest mistake was using the first timeout because he chose to run the ball on the goal line and didn't score. Having all 3 timeouts and being able to force a punt is much greater odds than an onside kick. Yeah, I agree 100%. I'm with you 100%. That's what I was saying is, you can look at those, and they're all mistakes because they all lead to the fact that you're down and trying to come back and down 2 scores. It all leads to that. But yes, your time management from 3 minutes out to lackadaisically walk down to run the ball when you know you can't use a timeout, to then run the ball and not have your team immediately have another play ready to go to say pop back up and go. Just all of those things made it seem like you had made preparations like this was not going to happen, and you were not ready to go into a game where you were going to have to play a 2-minute drill and understand, okay, that means it's 3:02 left. We need to go get a field goal within a minute. That's all we need. All we need is to kick a field goal within a minute. That's the actual, analytically, the right way to do it. Get downfield, get the field goal. Then you have 3 timeouts and the 2-minute warning to get the stop against a Chiefs team that the offense wasn't rolling well. Now, Pacheco had a great game. He was only averaging 2.8 yards per carry, but he was doing pretty good. They stayed to the run game all game long. He had 24 carries for 68 yards. He may be able to get him a first down. But I agree with you. That goes into the what I was saying is if we're gonna go talk about Mike McCarthy, that's the same thing. It's coaching malpractice to call that timeout and basically screw yourself out of any shot to get the ball back. And I agree with you. I agree with you 100% on that one. I want to play you some sound from Hook 'em Up with Ian Robbie, a little replay behind the Burnt Orange Curtain. Always good when we get that, especially on a Monday. All the notes over the weekend, talking some Texas. We'll play that for you. Come back. More text line 512-447-3776 on a Monday afternoon. It's a Hook 'em Up replay.
All right, several nuggets that we need to hit from the 40 acres. We'll talk about Texas basketball here in a second. But Texas football, they may be rounding out their support staff. They hired an analyst, Brandon Huppert, from Oregon State. He has a history and a background with PK, going back all the way to his Boise State days. Texas, I believe, Texas defense coordinator Pete Kwiatkowski was the D-line coach at the time at Boise State when he first coaches Huppert. And then after Huppert's playing career, he started as a defensive quality control analyst from 2013, 2017 under PK. And then Chris Peterson there at Washington. Then Dan Hawkins hired Hubbard to coach the defensive line at UC Davis in 2017, a group that set the single-season program record, actually with 37 sacks at the time, so that's pretty good. And Hubbard returned to Washington in 2020, and at one point was the director of player development, and I believe he had a similar role at Oregon State most recently, and he's coming from Oregon State to Texas. Now, if he's coming as an analyst, which means no on-field coaching and no recruiting for him, but I believe you still can do some of the same things you did as director of player development if there are certain players that Texas would like for him to evaluate and come up with a kind of a plan of action as to how to develop those guys and what their trajectory should be and what goals they need to meet for them to achieve their ultimate, obviously, success. Essentially, that's what he was doing. You could do that in an analyst role too. Essentially, it's all about scouting, looking at a player's skill set, then projecting what that player, what you want that player to be, and how you want to maximize them in your system, and then what are the steps in between to help you achieve that. That's essentially what a player development guy is going to do, and then making those kind of practical connections between diet, nutrition, strength and conditioning, on-field success, on-field training, drills, all of that, all encompassing. And that's what a director of player development, they got a lot of things they do, but that's part of their role. And I wonder with some of the younger guys, if he can help you come up with some of those plans. Essentially those scouting evaluation plans for individual player development. So we'll see. But also he works with D-line. And Texas has a new D-line coach in Kenny Baker. So also I'm assuming that he could offer insight on techniques, fundamentals with the Texas defensive line as well. So maybe that's why they're bringing him in, because PK likes him, knows him, and he's a guy that's worked with the D-line, and maybe he could come in and help you be, I don't know, so quasi assistant to the defensive line coach, but in an analyst capacity. So there you go. That's and I believe now they have 3 between William Gay, Hubbard, and also Paul Chryst, who reportedly is returning. I haven't seen him confirm that, but they don't really confirm anything about these analysts. We just kind of see them reported. I don't know if the Texas University actually comes out to announce it. I don't think I've ever really seen that. We just get great reporting from a lot of the other sites about these kind of things. So Brandon Hubbard being the latest analyst that is added to the Texas support staff. Also on the recruiting trail, now Longhorn fans were excited that Texas could potentially get Jabbar Muhammad, the corner from Washington, who was in the transfer portal, one of the best I think he was the top corner actually in the transfer portal as of last week, and was an all Pac-12, I think second team all Pac-12 defender. He has decided to stay in, well, at least for now, with a former Pac-12 team. He's going to go to Oregon. So I believe the report is that Oregon was able to offer him NIL-wise. I'm sure that Oregon, they got a sugar daddy, so they probably could offer whatever Texas is offering. But I believe from what I heard, shout out to my man CJ Vogel from On Texas Football, he's hinting that maybe it was playing time, and at Texas, a lot of rotation of your corners. You rotate your corners a lot. And you got young ones, Malik Muhammad, you got Terrence Brooks, you got Gavin Holmes, and then maybe he didn't want to end up in a situation where he's rotating and he's trying to go to the NFL.
Sure.
You want as much film as possible.
Well, Longhorn fans would understand. Isaiah Bond, the receiver who committed to Texas, says, this is my draft stock is my corporation. I'm trying to improve my draft stock. And coming to Texas, he has a good chance to be the number 1 wide receiver, the number 1 target. If he develops chemistry quickly with Quinn Ewers, he's that talented, he's that fast. He can replace Xavier Worthy as kind of that go-to big play receiver, which helps your draft stock. And that's what Jabbar Muhammad wants. He wants to line up against the top receivers in the Big Ten this year. He wants that tape. And
the more reps you have, the better. And right now in Texas, a lot of Longhorn fans have been frustrated with that, but they are committed to rotating their defensive players.
Yeah.
And they rotated damn near everybody on their defense, except for the linebackers. Jalen Ford didn't rotate a lot last season. But other than that, mostly everybody else is in
Sark
rotation.
believes in fresh defenses, and I think if you look at Georgia and then Michigan the last 3-4 years, they rotate a lot of players too.
Difficult, but they're They got a lot of NFL players back there
Yeah.
rotating too.
Well-
I think the argument for Longhorn fans is like, well, you don't have Georgia and Michigan's roster yet, so fewer rotations. Yes, keep guys fresh, but fewer rotations, and maybe be more judicious about when you rotate
Well,
guys.
yeah, and you don't have to take Murphy and Sweat off the field at the same time. You can leave one of them on the field.
On the fourth down?
Yeah, on the fourth down.
The other fourth down?
Yeah. Speaking of Murphy and Sweat, by the way, there are 5 Longhorns are being in Mobile this week, Rod, for the Senior Bowl.
That's gonna
Senior
be
Bowl
big.
practice start this week, and
Yeah,
then the
it's gonna be
game
fun to
on
watch.
Saturday. 5 Longhorns are there. There was going to be 7 Longhorns at this Senior Bowl before Alfred Collins and Jade Barron, decided they were coming back. They were both invited, but Jordan Whittington is there,
Yep.
Jalen Ford, Byron Murphy, Tavondre Sweat, and Christian Jones, all participating at the Senior Bowl this week.
JT Sanders not in there? Is he there?
No, you know where JT Sanders was? He in
I thought he was participating in something postseason. But I may be
East West Shrine.
Oh, East West Shrine.
He and Jonathan Brooks were up in Frisco this weekend for the
Yeah.
East West Shrine practices.
Okay, there you go.
Now, and of course, Jonathan Brooks is there with
He's
an
hurt.
injury. He's
Yeah.
not going to play. He was just there though to meet with whoever and be a part of it. So yeah, that's if you count Jade Barron and Alfred Collins who were invited but decided to come, continue their Texas career. I mean, that's 9 guys who would have been at these All-Star Bowls. That's pretty impressive what the Longhorns are putting into the National Football League
That's
right now.
really impressive. Yeah, and because I saw JT Sanders had measurements, and it was from the Shrine Bowl, as you just mentioned, and he's verified 6'3", basically close. You can round it up, 6'3" and 6 inches. So he's really close.
To being 6'4",
Yeah, to being 6'4", legitimate, and 252 pounds. So
JT Sanders.
yeah, man, he's looking good out there. Okay, before we get to the break here, I want to play this audio of the BYU coach. Now, Texas lost to BYU, but one of the controversies, I don't know why it was a controversy, was that some of the BYU fans, they wore T-shirts with horns down spelled out across all their shirts. So each shirt had a different letter on it, and it was spelled out horns down on the shirts. And at one point, the students were asked to remove the shirts and change shirts. And a lot of people thought that this was upon Texas's request, that somehow Texas was responsible for that. Here is the BYU head coach in the post game clarifying that it was not the University of Texas necessarily that made that request.
Thanks, guys. Hey, if I can, and Ty's going to be mad at me here, but I don't know. You guys report on this horns down T-shirt? Are you guys hearing this? Yeah. And just know from our student, they were taken off before the game started, right? And from the Rock and from our players and from our student body, that's just not us. That's not how we roll. And it was just a miscalculation on just a couple eager kids. Which we love the eagerness of these fans, but it's not what we do here. So we love all 18,000 people in this gym. They were incredible tonight, and just so you know, that's not something that we're supporting. Okay.
There you go. So basically, they made the decision to decide that they wanted to, not do the horns down, or at least not have that displayed at their arena. It wasn't Texas, even though I think nationally the narrative is that Texas was a little upset and offended by it. As I've said before, it's just free marketing. It's free media. No need to be upset about it. Everybody knows what it means. And lately, for some reason, I guess some narrative is developing that Longhorn fans are really deeply offended by horns down after the Rodney Terry thing happened, and then now this. And I don't know why it's starting to come up again. I thought we had settled this, but I guess not.
I saw this, and look, I shame whoever told those kids, told them to take the shirts off. They shouldn't have done that. They should have been able to wear those shirts.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And keep them.
Yeah.
It's not offensive. It's not like I said F off or anything. I mean, it was horns down, and they were written like they painted HO, and they just stood across the front row. They should have been. That's one of the great things about college basketball and home atmospheres and those kind of things. That should not have been. They should have kept them on, I believe.
Yeah.
And at the same time, look, the stuff about Rodney Terry and horns down. Rodney Terry was mad about horns down, but he was also mad about when it happened, and it was kind of an in-your-face thing, right? As you're shaking hands at the layup line. I think that context has to be included. He wasn't just mad about horns down. He was mad that they were doing it kind of as an in-your-face, we just beat you on your home floor thing, which
that's true.
That's as much as anything. But either way, it's a tired thing to talk about, the horns down. It's just like, y'all. It's not a huge deal, but it gets made a huge
Nationally,
deal.
it is.
I
but
know.
I think locally, it's not. But nationally, it's like the Arch Manning thing all over again.
It is.
Nationally, it's a huge story. Locally, we're like, it's not a story.
Well,
at all.
I think early on, Longhorn observers and people who cover Texas were concerned that it was Texas that asked them to take the shirts off. Now, if that had happened, then Texas is open for criticism. Like if somebody at Texas went over there and said, "Hey, can you ask them to take those shirts off?" We don't like that.
I agree.
That
with
didn't happen, and the
Yeah.
coach of BYU clearly just told you, "No, we don't do
did
that.
that.
We did that." Which they should
Which
have.
also, yeah, you went out. That's a mistake. Yeah, let the kids, man, let the kids
Let the kids
put
be
the horns
kids.
down. Well, they're just trying to give you a good home court advantage.
That's about home court, right? I mean,
Yeah,
if you go to-
distracting the Longhorns. That's good.
Dude, if you go to a Texas baseball game, the occupy left field guys are giving the left fielder hell. I'm talking about his sister. And
Yeah,
they looking up his family. His
Yeah.
girlfriend is
So
on
when
Instagram.
that Pop Fly heads his way,
Hell
he's
yeah.
thinking about something else.
Hell yeah, that's what you do, right?
Yeah.
You
See
give
that?
you give them the business.
Yeah, I don't. You're right, man. That's a little too. That's a little too cupcake, man. That's snowflake
That's
stuff.
cupcake, yeah.
That's snowflake stuff. man.
And I think it's unfortunate for Texas that it got kind of painted by some that they were the ones asking for it, or at least that they requested it. That didn't happen. But either way, bigger picture, kind of like the horns down with Central Florida, the Longhorn defense in that game. That was something to be more concerned about. To allow a team to shoot 64%, that's bad. I mean,
bad.
and they had like 15 dunks or layups, or 18 dunks or layups. It
wasn't pretty.
I will say for BYU, they lead the Big 12 coming into that game in points scored, but also in 3-point attempts per game. They were chunking it up there like 35 times a game. And in this game, they totally flipped their script. I mean, talking about breaking tendency.
Got to the rim, huh?
They changed what they were, and they started going right to the basket. I think that surprised Texas. The frustrating part is there was never an adjustment made to any of it, and they ended up shooting 64% for the ball game because everything was coming right at the rim. And then, they did knock down some threes as the game went on, but instead of shooting 35 like they normally do, they shot 17. So that got cut in half, and they went to the basket like crazy. That was a pretty impressive performance by BYU in that game. Longhorns tonight with Houston, Rod.
H-Town.
Cougars in town.
Good stuff there from me and Rob Beebe, taking you behind the burnt orange curtain. All right, we're going to take one more break here. We take this break, then we'll come back, and we will get to the rest of the text on the text line, 512-447-3776. If you want to talk Texas basketball, Texas football, if you got some NFL takes you want to throw in there, or you just want to chime in on the big fat poll of the day, who is the best mascot in sports? I have it as the Coyote, and I'm right. It's the Coyote. He caught another bat this weekend. We know it's a Coyote. So if you want to join in that conversation, 512-447-3776. We will get to those when we come back here on the Sports Complex in the Horn 1019, AM 1260, the Horn app, and hornfm.com. All right, wrapping things up here on the Horn on a Monday afternoon. Let's hope that Texas gets a big rebound today against Houston at home. It's the stripe out. I'm rooting for it. Texter says too much Cougars playing the BYU Cougars and the Houston Cougars. Hopefully, this is a 4-game stretch against ranked teams. If you can go 3 out of 4 in that stretch for a team that everyone was selling short to the West Virginia game and said they couldn't do anything, I think it's a pretty good ending for it. Really helps your tournament resume as well. So a big game for Texas tonight. That's at 8 o'clock. We'll be talking about that tomorrow. More NFL talk as well. Some NBA. We'll see if the Spurs can get a win streak going too against the Wizards. All that and a whole lot more coming up on the show tomorrow. But until then, be kind, be safe, keep your underwear clean. We'll see you right back here tomorrow for more of the Sports Complex.